Right. Hey, Coach Dejan, thanks for joining me today for this simple coach to coach interview. As always, love seeing you. Hate the school you represent. No, not really, but really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Good to see you too. I appreciate it as always.
Okay. So, knowing that you haven't had a full time to sort of assess how things went and all that stuff, what is your initial reaction to your season?
I would use two words: sad and disappointed. And when I say sad, I share that sentiment with everyone in the program. I think that we did a lot of great things. I thought we trained well. I thought we played well. It felt like one of those years that the soccer gods weren't really in our corner. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
posts, a lot of goal line clearances, a lot of weird things that happen in a sport that we all know, is kind of wonky to begin with, right? Like best team doesn't always win, and certainly when you don't have luck on your side, where I feel like we didn't most of the time. The results kind of don't go your way, or don't show your body of work or the kind of team or
Yeah.
talent that you had. So it just kind of felt like a uphill climb and battle the entire season, where I truly don't think our record reflected how good we are or how well we played, or even how well we prepared or trained or anything of the above.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the soccer gods, is there any, do you have any thoughts as to why that was this year?
I don't, and trust me, that's all I've thought about probably for the last
Sorry.
last month
Like,
here. No, truthfully,
yeah, like, yeah.
I'm a pretty transparent person. And I also think I'm a pretty realistic person. And in my previous 23 seasons, there's been plenty of games where you just don't deserve to win. You didn't play well. You
Yeah,
didn't do
yeah,
what you're supposed to
yeah.
do. And you have to look at yourself in the mirror and own that and be accountable. And I can honestly say, and this is no disrespect against anyone that we played against, I really don't think there's one game that we didn't deserve to win, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to say should win, because soccer again
Yeah,
is
yeah.
interesting and whatever. But um, I felt very good about what we did and how we did it. It just felt like once we got to the final third, we were creating chances, we were getting in the right spots. But here comes a 3 or 4 post game, incredible goalkeeper performance. Again, guys diving on the line once the ball did get past the keeper, and goal line clearances. It was interesting stuff like that. And again, credit
Mm-hmm.
to all the teams that we played. I am by no means trying to act like they were not good teams or what have you, but it felt like when it came to get the result, which is the only thing that matters, no one cares how
Mm-hmm.
many games you
Yeah.
outshoot somebody or what your possession percentage is or completed passes. I certainly don't either. Um, that part of it, for whatever reason, was lacking. And we kind of came back to the drawing board every day, like, not sure what else we could do different here.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that because I watched the Kenyan game and I thought you guys deserved more. Right? And then on the flip side of that, I watched the game when you played Stockton and you won 3-0. And I kept thinking, if this if you harness that team and your ability to score, there's no stopping you, right? Like, it was again one of those, and I just thought the two of those were kind of, in hindsight, almost indicative, right? Like, here you do well against Kenyon, you create chances, and you, what was it, like the last, I don't even know, 8 minutes that they scored or something like that. Like,
I think it was under
it's
a minute or something like
under a
that.
minute. Yeah, that's the one. And you're like, yeah, you can totally see how it was just kind of like, are you kidding me? One of those moments. But
It, it's ironic that you bring up the Stockton game, because honestly, that might have been the best John Carroll men's soccer performance I've seen
mm-hmm.
in a decade. I mean, I'm talking about from start to
it,
finish, everything was clicking.
yeah,
Um, like the soccer gods were in our corner that day for sure. I
yeah,
mean, it
yeah,
was I mean, I don't know if I even spoke the whole game. The guys were in control
yeah,
and they did their thing, and I think they followed it up with a great effort against Trying 2 days later.
yeah.
It was a great alumni weekend and a lot of positive vibes and things like that. And then honestly, after that weekend, that's where you can kind of feel that things started going against us. And
Yeah.
truthfully, again, I give our guys credit. I mean, they battled. It was not for a lack of effort. It was not for a
Mm-hmm.
lack of talent. It was not for a lack of preparation. it just kind of felt like there was a force field around the goal there for
Yeah.
a good 6 to 8 weeks, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's the way it goes sometimes.
And then there were games. I think it was maybe the BW game where I was like, you why aren't why don't you have four on the score? You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
the flip side to that being like, yeah, you won, but like, why is it so hard? That's the way I synthesized everything. It's like it just seems too hard in that final third for you all when it's not clicking to get a goal. I don't know if that's an accurate way to assess it, but that's from my vantage point.
No, that's totally
But
fair.
that's what it looked like. I mean, I would ask, like, was there anything that you think you could have changed, or were you just kind of like the dam should break?
We definitely felt like the dam was going to break.
Yeah,
Again, I think it's hard in a vacuum to see us maybe once or twice for those who watched. If you were in the program at training daily, at film daily, like we were positive. We were doing again. The training sessions were great. I mean, we were doing the things we were supposed to do. You just kind of felt like at some point that tide was going to turn,
mm-hmm.
and it eventually never did. I've been part of this program in years where we struggled to score goals, but we didn't have guys to score goals. It made sense why we couldn't
Yeah,
score
yeah,
goals.
yeah.
Where our I'll call them front
Mm-hmm.
six or front eight, if you want to count three forwards and a 10 or just the three
Mm-hmm.
forwards and the guys that sub in for them, those guys have all proven it. They've scored
Yeah,
goals, they've had success, they've been all conference players, all region players, things like that. So it wasn't like we were wishing on something we had never seen before or
yeah.
just waiting for something to happen for a new guy. Like these guys had done it. And
Mm-hmm.
um, sure, we could always have tried different people, but it wasn't like the guys who were in those positions weren't talented, weren't proven, weren't veterans, and things like that.
I think that's why I was so high on you guys at the start of the season was because I thought, man, they're bringing back a core group of guys that I think can really play and really. And so I would never thought, I mean, of all of the things I would have thought about you all, is that struggling to score goals was not going to be an issue for you.
Likewise,
You know what I mean? Like going into the season, I thought, oh, they could be double digit. They could be 2, 3 goals a game if against the right team. I mean, not saying that you play Ohio Northern and that's what you're going to do, right? But I kind of, and then like I said, it just became. It seemed to me it was just like hard to get it there. Even like you're right, like times it was like cellophane on the goal. Like, how did you not score? Because there's bodies flying all over the place and it bangs out, right? Like, yeah. But um, who's the best team you played? Do you think all season?
that's a tough one. I mean, there's a lot of really good teams that we played. I mean, played Denison in the preseason. Obviously, you know how much I think of Brandon and the Big
Yeah,
Red and what they're doing. They're just first class in everything they do. Obviously, Travis at Kenya in that opening game. Um, I truly thought the Lycoming game we played there. I thought they were very, very talented. And
yeah,
if there was a game we weren't going to get a result, that was the one I walked out of there like maybe we were, maybe a
lucky.
tie was fair today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But yeah, again, I think you put those kind of teams in that category where they were
mm-hmm.
very good. Um, Once you get into OAC, like the rules
Yeah.
kind of go out the
Go out
window.
the window. Yeah, yeah,
It's the non-conference and national tournament are very similar, and then the
yeah,
OAC is just a dogfight.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
there's no rhyme, there's no
No.
reason. Like, on a given day, random things happen. But you have to give respect to a team like Mount Union. I Carter Hancock for me is a top 10 player in the country.
Mm-hmm.
He's fantastic.
Kid
Otterbein,
is good in front of the goal, isn't he? Like, just I
clinical,
mean, yeah, yeah.
clinical. I was at a wedding on Saturday night. A JCU volleyball alum, and I probably spent half the night talking about Carter Hancock because there was a Mount Union grad there. So Carter knows how much I think of him. Northern's your usual suspect. They're
Yeah,
always there. They're
yeah.
consistent. They're steady Eddie all the time. But then you have Otterbein, who kind of started off a little bit slow,
So
um,
yeah,
got their footing, and they come back and win the thing when
yeah.
they certainly didn't have the kind of non-conference that they're accustomed to, and they figure it
Mm-hmm.
out at the end. But guys like Nick Isaac and Mark Wishmeyer, and you have
Yeah.
Hayden Vu, very good players. So again, the conference in the OAC is it's always interesting. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. What happened against Capital in the tournament?
Kind of the same thing. I felt like we were on the ball for most of the game, getting chances, hit a couple posts. Their goalkeeper had a great game.
Great game.
Um, they got pretty direct there in the second half, and
Mhm.
ball start bouncing around. Game gets a little more chaotic as you're trying to push forward and get one. And
Yeah.
Jacob Deaver, who I think is one of the better players in the conference as well, he got on one and finished it, and that's all she wrote. It was kind of
Yeah.
a microcosm of our entire season,
Yeah.
if I'm
Yeah.
being honest.
Yeah. 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 I thought you would go into the tournament and be like, okay, whatever the past has been, it's almost like, hey, it's a reboot. Let's just get back to what we do, and then, yeah. So, but you're right. Like you fall to you fall in the tournament. Whoever you fall to, is uncommon, and it makes you wonder, sort of again, are you hexed? Which could be because, man, did I break out some voodoo against you guys in the
Somebody did.
season? Yeah, yeah. I had your doll, and I was like, did you feel the pins going in as I was? Um, okay, so let me talk a little bit about this. Are you finding yourself now, after the season you've had, do you find yourself thinking of, okay, what do we have to do different for next year from a personnel standpoint? So are you recruiting differently because of that?
What I was saying was, I don't think it really affects the way we recruit. I think a major reset button had to happen, no matter how the season went. For a variety of reasons. One, obviously, leaving the OAC and going to the NCAC
Mhm.
changes the landscape a little bit. Secondly, this MPI stuff and how that will change just approaches to scheduling and results and things like that. And three, I think we have a mass exodus of players here that were seniors or fifth years, where we basically lost, three senior classes in the last two school years.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of new players now in the program that haven't been part of the program. So
Mhm.
uh, I think we'll keep doing what we're doing in terms of recruiting. I just think that we kind of always self-reflect on everything that we do. I think we'll look a little bit deeper this year because of those three reasons, and
Mhm.
it's kind of that natural break where I think it's time to really step back and reevaluate things in a little different light than we do from a year-to-year basis.
Mhm. Do you find yourself? 'Cause you mentioned it, right? Do you think leaving the OAC, going to the NCAC changes your equation on how you recruit players? Or is it you still have the same profile? I don't know if profile is the right word, but you're looking for the same type of player regardless of where you're playing.
I think we're still looking for the same type of player. I think how we do things will be a little bit different, though, based on style of play and stuff like that inside the NCAC versus the
Mm-hmm.
OAC. And again, I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. I just think it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been of the belief for a very long time that the national tournament and the non-conference are a lot more similar than the games in the OAC. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that we got to keep doing what we're doing and get better at it, from a recruiting
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. But we probably need to think about our tactics and formations and stuff a little bit differently
Mm-hmm.
now that we're in the NCAC, and I think things will be a little more similar to the non-conference play, if you will, from past years and NCAA
Mm-hmm.
tournament and things like that.
So I talked to Coach Bergen at Marietta on Friday, and we were talking about you.
Uh-oh.
I, I mean, it was, we'd spent hours, just it was just crazy, just talking about you. Um, but we were saying that um, that soccer at John Carroll probably has the hardest if you were to look at all the sports going over to all your moving, right, your footballs, your basketballs, your field hockeys, or whatever you got, moving to the NCAC, soccer probably ranks as the hardest, if not the most difficult transition because of who you're now going to be facing in the NCAC.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. And that's me being respectful to the OAC
Sure,
and the
sure.
kind of, I mean, let's be honest, it's been very good. And the NCAC obviously had a great year. They got 4 teams in the national
Mm-hmm.
tournament, and by no means is it a step down. We know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would probably put your, men's and women's tennis, men's and women's swim and dive, the men's and women's lacrosse. Like I think there are some very elite national contender programs in the NCAC in some of those sports.
Uh-huh.
Um, and again, I not trying to discredit
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah,
credit,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Soccer
I'm
wise,
just
but
more curious, right? Because again, not to say that it's not right. Every conference is hard. I always say this is my latest thing from a few years back, which is just hard to win. It doesn't matter your conference. To consistently win is difficult for when you're dealing in collegiate athletics. And but his point was you're the top to bottom in the NCAC is super highly competitive, maybe a little bit more than maybe not so much the OAC, but that you're going into this conference that is already stacked. So it's not like you're going from the OAC to, oh, we're taking a step down and we're going to be able to win it, right? Like he was just saying, like it is going to be equally, if not more, hard going into the NCAC.
sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Again, 4 teams in a national tournament is very
yeah,
impressive. I mean, what the NESCAC I think got 8
yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah, Aiden, yeah,
There's some crazy things like that, but that's how we want it. I mean,
yeah,
if you want to do something, if it's easy, it's probably not that well worth it, right? And
yeah, yeah.
we have a lot of respect for the NCAC. Obviously, we've played Kenyon for years, Denison, Ohio Wesleyan, Worcester, Oberlin. We've already played a bunch of these. I would say over 5 years, so we kind of already have a feeling of what that looks
Mm-hmm.
like. Now, in the non-conference in September, it's a little bit different than in conference in October, but
Mm-hmm.
we certainly know what we're walking into.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, which begs the question, year one, what are your thoughts on the NPI? Make news, say something so that I could be like, oh my God, I broke news for the first time ever in D3. No, your thoughts.
It's a learning process, right? I think no matter what the system is, someone's not going to like it and someone's going to like it, right? At the end of the day, having the transparency of the rankings and all of this is what the NCAA wanted, and they don't want a committee of humans, making decisions on who the last team is. They want a computer doing
Yeah.
that. Now, I'm in my second year now on the national committee, so I kind of have the inside scoop. And
Ooh, I did not know that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah,
Speak.
yeah. This is year 2, and honestly, like I've been just trying to learn. Like truthfully, like I sit in these meetings and I'm a talker. I know you know that, so I really try to keep my mouth shut and just listen and learn from people who are a lot smarter than me. So I've been trying to just kind of put my hands around like, what does this really mean? What's the strategy? Um, like watching the movement in the last couple of weeks of the teams going up and down or lack thereof
Mm-hmm.
has been interesting. I do think, again, the pros and cons, it shows you a conference like the NESCAC can get 18 teams in. So why can't other
Mm-hmm.
teams do it or other
Mm-hmm.
conferences? But at the same time, you feel bad for those who got slighted by it this year because it was kind of introduced at the 11th hour.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone had scheduled as if, the
Mm-hmm.
regular
Yeah.
committee was going to make this decision. And, there was no real preparation for it. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that was kind of unfortunate. But yeah, I wish I had more to tell you. It's more me just trying to learn. And anyone who asks me, I don't think anyone truly knows until we do this for 2 or 3 years and we actually
Yeah,
see it and
yeah.
feel it and um, just kind of figure things out on the fly.
It's too new and it's too easy to pick apart. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you could grumble, like, oh, it's this, that, and the other, and I will say I'm not a fan of like conferences getting more than 3 bids. Like I would just rather you spread the wealth out. But that's just me, self-interested. So NESCAC getting 8 teams, while I'm not arguing or disagreeing with that ranking, but I do think teams have to win. All right, I go back to that. Fundamentally, you have to win, whatever your situation is in your conference, and that shouldn't necessarily matter. So that's my only thing as of late, and that's. But I don't know if that's something they care about. You know what I mean? Like, are they looking at teams in conferences, or are they looking at, and maybe are they looking at 400 and some odd teams, and how do you rank the 400 some odd teams so you could pick out the best 62 or whatever the number ends up being? Um, so, um, what was your favorite game this season?
I mean, probably the Stockton one because we played so well, and
Uh
the ball found the back of the net 3 different times and some
huh.
pretty good goals. But no, like, there, in I have a very different mindset. In September, we're trying to build and put together good performances and um, trying to ascend to what can be our peak and top form, of a
Mm-hmm.
season, right? In October, November, you're trying to figure out how to get results within that form. So if you don't play that well on a given day, and I'm sorry, if you do play well on a given day and you don't win, it doesn't really matter because you need to get 3 points
Mm-hmm.
in that match. But I do think that Stockton game was that perfect storm of a really good performance, ball on the back of the net, played well
Mm-hmm.
defensively, great crowd, lot of energy at Don Shula Stadium. It was just a really fun night to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. All right, because you brought the subject up, whether you realize it or not. Are you guys getting your own stadium, own field?
I hope so. Not to my knowledge or anytime soon. I know it's something we've discussed here internally that if the opportunity ever presented itself, we would certainly jump on it. But I don't think anything is close or on the horizon from what I know.
Yeah. I think you guys deserve it. Well, no, that's weird. I'm starting to get on this other kick, which isn't going to make me friends, right? Like I mean, barring the only reason why is that you can is that somebody's landlocked, right? Like NYU, you can't argue, hey, you deserve your own field. Like, good luck, finding anything, right? But I think you guys deserve a place, and the women's team as well. It just makes the most sense. I'm getting tired of watching on the football lines, but sorry, I just ranted on about that. That's my latest thing. Like I can't. It shouldn't be. It should not be anymore. It shouldn't be. Here we are, 2024. I think it's time. I think time for schools to have and dedicated to lacrosse as well, right? Like,
Sure.
don't have to comment on that because this is being recorded. I can say whatever I want. You have a job to protect, so I totally get it. How many guys are you graduating?
We are losing 13 seniors.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a dumb question, but how do you? It's not so much the numbers. Like, how do you make up for the vacuum that creates? Like the emotional commitment, the right, like the leadership. How do you even begin to figure out ways to how do you replace that?
Planning. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
And
you know,
hope.
yeah. Our coaching staff sat down. I would say it's early 2022, and we kind of saw the writing on the wall in terms of the fifth years and the extra COVID eligibility and the way
Mm,
that things were going to kind of shake out with those 4 remaining classes, right? And we didn't know who would come and not come back, but we had a pretty good feeling that most would want to if they had the opportunity to, right?
mm,
And again, we had 8 fifth years this year. That's kind of
mm,
not normal, and
right.
we started planning accordingly because we knew we were going to be top heavy there in terms of a veteran team in those last 2 seasons. And we were going to lose that third class that were regular
Mm-hmm.
seniors as well. So, like I said, 3 classes, 2 years.
Yeah.
So we really circled this current freshman class that came in, and then this next freshman class that will come in August of 25. And um, we knew we had to hit 2 home runs in those 2 classes so that we're not putting ourselves in a rebuild mode. I
Mm-hmm.
would call it, we want to stay in a reloading mode. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we hit a home run with our freshman class this year. I think we hit a
Mm-hmm.
grand slam. I think that
Really?
very, very impressed with the players top to bottom. A lot of really good players, a lot of versatility, character, leadership. I think these guys are hungry. Some had to pay their dues a little more than others this year because we did have
Mm-hmm.
so many older guys come back. But there
Mm-hmm.
was a lot of guys that played as freshmen on a very veteran team, which I thought was impressive. So I think we certainly did our job with this first class here. But we have to go do that again in this upcoming recruiting class. And I think if we do that, hopefully we can continue that rhythm of again, not putting ourselves in a rebuild mode, and we just kind of reload and keep getting after it.
Do you also sort of bank on your juniors to fill in, like
Of
step
course.
up more from the leadership standpoint? I get the soccer. I think you guys, soccer wise, of all the things, is probably the easier things that you get, right? Like you get good soccer players regardless, but I just more curious about, yeah, the juniors stepping into that leadership vacuum that your seniors leave and your fifth years leave.
Yeah. Any coach that doesn't tell you that the leadership and culture piece of their program is more important now than ever is lying to you. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting time in this generation of players where that stuff really matters. I think back when you and I were playing, that was kind of natural. It just kind of
Yeah.
happened organically where
Yeah.
this has to be a little more manufactured and you kind of
Mm-hmm.
have to not force guys to do it, but like provide opportunities and
Yeah.
uh, show them the way of how to do those things. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we take very seriously. It's something that we are starting right away, to get ready for next year.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have our big end of the year meeting Wednesday here, and we already have some events that we're talking about that we want to do to get the guys
Mm-hmm.
together and kind of keep them banded together before we get back here for the spring semester. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's something we definitely have a lot of hope that our rising seniors can help us with, and I certainly I believe that they're up for the task.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that? And because I find this subject really interesting, where you said like nowadays it just seems a little bit more manufactured.
Hmm. Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
I think that Gen Z is just it's a different animal.
Right.
It's a very different thing, especially throughout this COVID pandemic thing that we lived through, and these
Mm-hmm.
kids were put in an awkward position and stuff like that. But um, I think the old school, again, especially the pre cell phone era, or where cell phones weren't that important era, you kind of were forced to talk to one another, and you did things differently and whatever. Like one thing, and I'm sure a lot of programs do this, is, we don't want guys on their phones when we're at a dinner, right? Like put the phone
Yeah.
in your pocket and, things like that, where I think before you didn't have to say those things. It was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of natural, where now hey, like, let's jump off of Instagram and talk to the
Yeah.
guy that's sitting across from you. So, um, I we talk a lot internally in the industry, but coach to coach, program to program, of things they do for team building and stuff like that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone has a very high level of focus when it comes to things like that.
Yeah. 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 I don't. Not that I don't think it was a priority, but I think people just brought to their own. They brought that with them, right? They understood that component and sort of how they had to be. And yeah, it could have been a technology thing. It could have been, but I find that interesting, right? Like, is it? It's one of those things where, are you doing these things because it's evolved? Like people have gotten more sophisticated around how do you build a culture, or is it you're filling in again a sort of a void of where kids are today and how they interact today, and it's not always healthy in a team environment. If that makes sense, but let so so what is your plan for, you're losing a lot of guys? What's your spring going to look like?
You know, I think again, it has to be a balance of that team building aspect where we're getting to
Mm-hmm.
know to one another, even guys who've been in the team together, but they're just all going to be in different roles, right? Than
Mm-hmm.
they were in the previous season. And then a lot of teaching, a lot of going
Yeah.
over, you know, looking at, hey, what's our identity going to be going forward into the NCAC? What kind of things
Mm-hmm.
do we need to focus on, and trying to implement as much of that as we can before the
Mm-hmm.
summer hits, so that we hit the ground running in August when we get back here for preseason. So I do think there will be a little more teaching than normal, and a
Mm-hmm.
little more tactical analysis than we probably have in the past. But I'm not going to divert from the culture piece, and
Yeah.
making sure these guys are having fun and want to be at practice. If we go run out and do 24 tactical sessions, I'm not going to want to go to practice either. You know, yeah, you know, that's not fun either, right?
Yeah.
So it's finding that balance of making sure we're
Yeah.
getting work done, but we're enjoying it and each other, and things like that. But that's certainly a balancing act, because let's be honest, as coaches, you want to go out there and teach as much as you can, but at the same time, you want your players to want to be there and not hear the same stuff over and over again,
Yeah.
especially when you can't play any games, or one game for that matter. So that's something we're on the drawing board every day, thinking about, so that when we get back here in January, we have a good plan in place that we can execute.
Yeah. Like I always used to say, like there was nothing crushed the soul more is when you step out on the soccer field and it's like, okay, we're gonna do a tactical session and we're gonna focus on how we're gonna play, and I'm gonna blow the whistle every 30 seconds to fix and pick. Nothing kills the desire to play like
Sure.
that. 24 sessions over and over again would be. Eh, you're a big boss man, so I had no idea about that. So is there talk at all about maybe getting more games in the non-traditional season, or whatever we're calling it today?
I'm not sure what I'm allowed to share, if I'm being honest. uh, but I
I'm
can
here
promise.
breaking
Yeah.
news.
Uh,
No, yeah,
No, I can promise you that's something that's talked about all the
yeah.
time, and proposed and things like that. Now, the powers to be, or the powers that be, that have the authority to make those decisions, we'll see what they say.
Hmm.
But that's something I think every committee has been pounding the table for a long time,
Yeah,
and I do think there's some momentum there. Creative ways to make that happen, where it doesn't affect the overall landscape of a calendar year, and the NCAA college soccer scene and stuff like that. But I do think we're closer than ever for something like that to happen. At
yeah,
least I hope so.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's just too long to not break it up and to find something, right? Like, you know, there's nothing better than a game, so we might as well throw that in there. And I was even, if it's such an issue, just reduce. I be like, reduce the number of practices and replace the practices you cancel. Replace them with game or right, some form or
Sure.
fashion, just to so that teams could play. I think that would be huge. I think that would be huge. Couple more, then I'll let you go because I'm sure you're busy. But all right, so I gotta ask you. So Division 1 now has the limits on the roster, 28, and so heard the transfer portal was blowing up. I spoke with just earlier today, Corey Kirk at Capital, and he was talking about how the portal is blown up. And first, is there anything you look at from that in that respect? Is that something you're interested in, or are you okay with sort of operating with, hey, we're going to bring in a freshman class and we're going to teach them and all that stuff?
I was really big on the transfer portal when COVID happened, just because it was a weird time, and
Yeah,
um, there was no blueprint for what was going on. It was kind of chaos, and everyone was
yeah,
just trying to figure things out. I'm a lot more against the transfer portal than I ever have been as a head coach. Especially with the youth of our team, and
yeah. Hmm.
I think there's something to be said of a player that is in your program for 4 years and understands things a little bit differently. I'm not saying we'll ever completely go away from it, but I think it's got to be a pretty perfect fit, in
Hmm.
order for us to jump on something. So for me, I think my assistants will be in the portal daily, just monitoring and seeing if anything will pop up that is of interest for us. But I don't think I feel the same way that I did even 2 years ago, than
Hmm.
I do now in terms of, hey, we have to go find X, Y, and Z in the portal, or we have to bring in 5 guys from the portal. I think it's got to be a very organic.
Yeah, yeah,
It's got to feel right, for us
yeah,
to
yeah.
do it rather than force something that maybe is not there.
Do you think there's coaches in Division 3 that are they look at the portal as like a key component to their recruiting process?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Like they'll
And
take a player for 1 year, 2 years, rather than develop a player for four.
sure. Yeah. And no situation is created equal. And again,
Hmm.
like there's some very high academic schools out there who
Right.
are banking on some grad transfers, and
Yeah.
that makes total sense. I
Yeah.
get
I
it.
can buy that. I can buy that. Like
Yeah,
I'm okay with that, I think.
yeah,
Like it's you got a grad school, okay. You're the beneficiary of that.
right. And again, if I could do that, I that's probably a little more advantageous. I get it. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, if you're bringing in 5, 6, 7 guys a year, um, that's tough, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. I mean, we did at one point, like I said, during COVID, but that for
Yeah.
me was a very different situation with way different parameters. Where if you're asking for my plan going forward, I wouldn't be shocked if we don't bring in anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a natural. I said this today to Coach Kirk. I think I think it's going to be natural for these guys to flow down, and it's not necessarily because of anything about the allure of it. It's just going to become that much more difficult. And I
Sure.
think as schools definitely, and you see it Division 1, right? They're more and more you're starting to see a reliance. I don't want to say reliance, but more and more international players that reduces that number down even further. And so I think it's just a matter of time before guys are like, well, I want to play, right? I'm not going to Ohio State, so I'll go to John Carroll.
Sure.
I don't know if that's a reality, but that would be something I could totally see. And so you're going to see these guys come down levels, Division 2, Division 3. That's a theory of mine. I have no way to prove it, but it sounds good. Um, um, you do, what's what is like? How what do they do? Does John Carroll encourage you to take this approach? Do they sort of? I don't want to say they take your autonomy away. I mean, like, but do they say like, we prefer the 10 freshmen than the 8 transfers? Do they say? Is there anything like that in your world?
Not for me, at least. I've never been told that or heard anything like that. I think again, you want to find talent wherever you can get it, but back to that culture piece and team
Mm-hmm.
building, I
Yeah,
think that's a little bit easier when you're bringing in guys as 18-year-old freshmen who kind of grow up with you and learn,
yeah, yeah.
just naturally, right? Um, now,
And they haven't been corrupted, right? Like
right,
you don't know in the transfer portal. I was been saying this for a while. The guys in the transfer portal, they're there for a reason, and don't pretend it is something altruistic, right? Like and you don't know if they're whatever. But
right.
um, all right, Coach, I am going to let you go because I'm already going to get heat for talking about John Carroll soccer for as long as I did. No, but thank you as always. It's great talking to you. You're more than welcome anytime to hop on board. I'd love to. Oh wait, I do have to ask you. Do you expect any? Do you have any picks? Like, do you think who's gonna? Do you have a pick for who's gonna win the NCAA's?
I don't have a pick. There's some very good teams, but I'll tell you, I'm rooting really hard for Denison and Kenyon. My
Yeah.
relationship with Brandon and Travis has grown a lot, especially I would say over this past year. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, again, I probably got to stop texting them during their games. Like every time they score a goal, and I get excited and things like that. So I don't know who's going to win it. There's a lot of very talented teams left, but I'm really pulling for those two. They run tremendous programs. They're great people. They're great friends, and I'm really proud of the kind of seasons they have this year and are
Yeah,
having.
yeah.
Hopefully, It's not done yet.
You get to compete against them next year.
Can't wait.
You know what? Mount Union stepping it up big time, and you go. Okay, I get it. I see it. See the writing on the wall. No.
Hey, you'll be excited to know we are playing Mount Union next year.
Oh, nice.
Dave and I were able to find a date.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, we're
That's
keeping it
awesome.
going.
Hey, thank you again, as always. Really do appreciate it. Give my best to your men and your coaching staff. Always love talking to you. And like I said, you're more than welcome to hop on at any point that you'd like.
Thank you.
So, all right.
I appreciate
all right,
it.
Coach. All right. Thanks.